History of Persia is a Hopful Media podcast production.
Every day, we rise, challenging ourselves to work for what we believe in. At U.S. Border Patrol, protecting our borders is more than a job. It's a calling. Agents answer the call, working together to keep our country and communities safe. If you're ready for a new mission, join U.S. Border Patrol and go beyond. Learn more at cbp.gov/careers.
What if you could have a career where the opportunities are as vast as our nation, where it's not about mission statements, but a shared mission? At U.S. Customs and Border Protection, we go beyond to protect more than borders, from ship to shore, air to ground, cities to local communities. CBP agents and officers are keeping people safe. Join U.S. Customs and Border Protection and go beyond for something far greater than yourself. Learn more at cbp.gov/careers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the History of Persia. This is a special episode and the first in our sort of interlude series between the Achaemenids and the Hellenistic Age proper. This set of episodes is going to include a few that I've been sitting on for a while, recordings and events I did with other people ages ago that I'm just now getting around to having a use for or needing to release. In this case, this is the audio from my live event with Umberto and Sariel from the So You Think You Can Rule Persia podcast, where they rank all of the kings from Deokes to Yazdegerd III in the grand tradition of Rexipod podcasts. This event was a ton of fun for us and required that I write altogether far too much script to ever be used for a single project. We sat down and did a hypothetical alternative history of what if Cyrus the Younger defeated his brother and became King of Kings. But to do that, we played with some audience participation, making it a choose-your-own-adventure alternate history, where the audience chimed in to decide which path and which diversion things would take as we imagined a different world. A minor consequence of how this was recorded and the type of audio we were able to get from the fine folks over at Moment means that the audio is not the best, and I wasn't able to edit out some of the crosstalk, but for the most part, everything seems to have worked out fine in the transfer. So hopefully you all enjoy this brief return to Achaemenid history and how it might have gone under a totally different set of circumstances. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Hey, we've got people chiming in. Welcome, welcome. Thank
Nice.
you all for tuning in to our very special live event. Before we get into everything, I think it's probably a good idea to do some introductions since we've got 2 podcasts worth of hosts and listeners, and you've never seen our faces before for most of us.
Probably.
So I'm Trevor Cully of the History of Persia. My pronouns are he, him, and my friends here are...
Okay, I'm Umberto from So You Think You Can Rule Persia. My pronouns are also he, him, and this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Sariel. I am the co-host of So You Think You Can Rule Persia, and my pronouns are they, them. Nice to meet everybody.
got people from all over. Viva la France.
Oh, nice. Hello.
And yes, none of us look like what you expected. That is the magic of podcasts.
Yes.
I don't actually
Sorry.
look like Pharnaces or Darius the Great, and Mike Duncan has been selling us razors for a decade while sporting a full beard.
That's true. Unfortunate. And we don't look like a mythical bird of legend, so that's also disappointing.
Oh, if only.
Sariel's shirt is
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah, it's working. It's getting there.
And
Listen, I like dinosaurs, okay?
I love dinosaurs. I've got like pewter dinosaur statues somewhere back there. And just so nobody thinks I'm crazy, if I start looking around at a whole bunch of different sides of me, it's because I have 4 monitors and all of them are doing things right now.
Trevor is taking one for the team and, kind of logistically taking care of everything, which means we have the easy part and he might be a bit stressed.
He has a full NASA setup going on. It's very complicated.
I've got the script in front of me so that I can actually look at the camera most of the time. But if I want to see what you two are doing, I'm going to look over to the side at some point.
We'll try not to mime too often.
So now that everyone knows who's who, let's get down to what we're actually doing today. This is a Choose Your Own Persian History podcast, live and in color. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but since the whole plan for the afternoon depends on audience participation, we should at least explain the rules of this little game I have planned.
Sounds fair.
I am currently staring at an ungodly script that will cover an alternative history exploring a hypothetical version of the Achaemenid Empire if Cyrus the Younger became King of Kings. It is one of history's big what-ifs, and coincidentally, also, I think the point in our shared narratives where Umberto and Sariel overtook my show.
Yeah, pretty much. We just zipped over and went far, far into the future.
Doing one king a week will do that to you, because I think
Yeah, that's speedy when it's a 40-year rule, and you just jump by in a week.
Yeah, I think I spent 17 episodes on Artaxerxes II, so that has an impact.
Understandable.
I
I
am
am
excited
literally
to see
looking at-
Sariel's reactions live.
Yeah, I'm literally looking at my notes because I'm like, do I have any notes from this?
Notes
I do,
were
actually.
Someone was the king at some point. Parasatis was there. Nice.
Yes, Parasatis is the mother of Cyrus the Younger.
Very good.
Correct. We're going to get into the
Uh,
background in a second, because there's still some more explaining to do.
Is Parasatis in our story?
Of course. She
Because I like her
still his
very
mom.
much. So, good.
The problem with this all is that history is real complicated, and even if just getting Cyrus to the throne gives us so many different options for where to depart from real-world history. So I wrote this script in the style of a choose-your-own-adventure book, and all of you out there listening are going to make the choices for us. When I get to a fork in the road, so to speak, jump into the chat and voice your opinion. I will also post an announcement at the top of the chat with your question and options. As a disclaimer, yes, I know about the butterfly effect, which is partly why the options will get more limited as we get further down the timeline. In reality, there's probably some scenario like no Battle of Canaxa means that a certain rock doesn't get knocked into the road, meaning some merchant's cart doesn't break an axle, leading into some cascade of events where King Marashu II of the Second Neo-Babylonian Empire conquers Greece in 252 BC, or something like that. Just work with me on a version we can actually predict. This is just going to stick to the information we know and is just for fun. The last fair warning is I'm already suspecting we're going to be pressed for time depending on which choices everyone makes, because I am a long-winded person and couldn't help myself but write 44 pages worth of script. At some point, I might not provide all of the options I wrote, or we as hosts might have to overrule the audience decision for time's sake. Never fear, I will make the whole script available on historyofpersiapodcast.com as a PDF and share it with Sariel and Umberto to do the same.
Nice.
The second element to this, and the reason I want my friends here on this particular version of the podcast with me, is that at the end of all of this, I want to rank our hypothetical King Cyrus III according to So You Think You Can Rule Persia's ranking system.
Yay.
They've covered the real version of these events, but neither have seen my script, so they're both going to kind of fill the Sariel role here if you listen to their show.
Don't worry, it's an easy one. You just have to
I'll try my best.
halfway pay attention and then be like, oh my god, and then it's fine. So like, if I can do it, you can do it.
I'll go for that.
You guys are going to discover and possibly disagree with my hypotheticals as we go. I think it will be fun if you at least occasionally do voice your disagreement and say, I don't think that's how it would have happened. But right now, I want to hand it over to you two to explain the criteria we're going to use to judge and, you know, maybe explain the basic idea behind your show or Rexipods in general, because I'm guessing at least part of the audience only listens to my show and doesn't know how yours works.
Sounds fair. So the general premise behind a Rexipod, which is this genre of podcast that has grown up in like the last year or two, basically, that's when it's spread from like 2 podcasts, like a dozen, is that you go through a list of kings of a certain people. It started with Rex Factor, the Kings of England, and later on expanded. And then at the end, you just rate all these different kings based on a series of categories that are mostly inane and partially serious. And then at the end,
some of them are based in actual facts, and some of them are just like,
some of them vibes.
What did this person look like? What do you think of this face? Rate it from 1 to 5. So it is very scientific and historically accurate, and you should definitely use this in your PhD thesis in history, because clearly we are such experts in the matter.
And then at the end of our rating, we get to decide if the king in question was a Shahanshah or a Shahanah, which in the regular show means whether they'll end up going to this final showdown. But in this case, I think we could just have like a special thing to talk about Cyrus III at the end, once we get there and like the end of time.
Well, we'll see how cool of a king he ends up being based on people's choices. So, I'm not judging, but I am judging. So,
yeah, that's the thing. Depending on the choices everyone makes, he could end up being a monster or an all right guy. So we will see how this goes. But
yeah,
speaking of how it goes, let's actually get going. I don't want to jump straight into decision making because it's been a couple of months since either of us covered Cyrus the Younger and his family, and I think we could all do with a little bit of a refresher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to assume that everyone has listened to at least one of our shows about these events, but Umberto and Sariel, since you're both a bit more removed from actively talking about this stuff than I am, please cut in if you need a reminder about something like who a historical figure is.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'll do. Because
we're too Hellenistic for now. We need to get back into the mindset.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Sariel, is there anything in particular you remember about the historical Cyrus the Younger?
My brain, not so much. My paper, a little bit more. He was the son of Darius II, right?
Yep.
I believe. Ocus.
Mm-hmm.
And he was Perixates' favorite for some reason.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out why, but apparently for some reason.
Attempted to murder the actual, successor to the throne and failed. And then Perixates was like, please don't have him executed, please. Pretty please, I like this son over my other son. This is very normal.
Totally healthy.
And yeah, then he like would attempt it again, like would attempt a coup again years later. Just, I honestly don't remember much more. I might be like, listen, it's been a while since we recorded this episode, so like, don't come for me. But I don't think there was anything more particularly out of the ordinary. Now, if you have to prove me wrong, please go ahead.
No, I don't think there was anything that out of the ordinary, aside from, like, one of his most famous stories is the time that his cousins came to visit him while he was satrap of Lydia, and their hands slipped out of their sleeves, so he had them executed. We have no idea why he did that.
That was,
It's
that's when he got
unexplained.
recalled.
Yeah,
home.
didn't something happen? Like, didn't that cause essentially, like, why are you behaving like king, and a really bad one at that, when you are like not, you do not have that amount of power? Like, why did you order this?
Yeah, it was basically Darius recalled him, and Cyrus just threw all his money at Sparta, saying, "Please burn Athens to the ground now. I need a win." And
it weirdly also coincides with Darius II starting to die. So it's not even all that clear if he was actually recalled for misbehaving, or if he just had to go home for a funeral. Or like, he probably thought he was going to be crowned king when he got there. So
yeah,
like, it might not have been recalled so much as like he felt like he was already king in waiting and could get away with it.
And lo and behold, he was wrong. Very wrong.
But the more important thing is that we get to the year 404 BCE. Prince Cyrus, better known to history as Cyrus the Younger, in order to distinguish him from his much more impressive and famous ancestor Cyrus the Great, is rushing home to the royal court, which was in Ecbatana or Susa, one of those two at the time. His father, Darius II, was dying. In addition to being a prince, Cyrus was the satrap of Lydia, like I said. That's the western half-ish of Turkey. And Keranos of the West, which was a rare and prestigious position that meant something like absolute military viceroy. It gave him authority over all of the other Persian satraps in the area, and Cyrus's mother, Parysatis, had urged Darius to appoint him Keranos at just 15 years old. And this probably plays into why he was Parysatis' favorite special boy, because he seems to have been a prodigy. He graduated from the Persian education system between 5 and 10 years early, and was immediately given the second or third most powerful position in the empire.
Fair enough. Also, nepotism helps.
Yeah, I did not get that impression of him, though. So either we just didn't talk much about, his particular achievements, because we were focusing on, the actual people who, the people on the throne. But yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, well, it probably helps that for my show, I covered Persian education through talking about why Cyrus was so special. Whereas you guys used Persian education to give Xerxes II a whole completely undeserved episode.
Yes, entirely. I love that fake out. It was wonderful.
You can blame that on Umberto. I did not know. I was not prepared. I am innocent. I know nothing. That's why I'm on this show.
I saw that name come up with a 40-minute timestamp and was so confused.
just look forward to the Parthians when I have stuff going on.
Anyway, as a teenage ruler, Cyrus was sent to Anatolia to help bring an end to the Greek-Peloponnesian War. The Persian Empire sided with Sparta in this one and opened up an Ionian front in the Greek conflict, but there was a whole bunch of infighting and scheming between the local governors that led to a very protracted conflict. Cyrus was sent to work with the Spartan High Command and distribute Persian funds so that they could actually bring an end to the war and stop having Persian cities get burned by Athenians. During his time in the West, the prince befriended the elder Spartan statesman and general Lysander, but he actually had to leave before the final confrontation with Athens, leaving Lysander in charge of basically all of the money in the world. This worked extremely well. Cyrus departed for the capital just months before Lysander achieved a crushing final victory over the Athenian fleet that led to them tearing down the walls of Athens and briefly installing a council of Greek tyrants to rule the city. But while Greece was being Greece, Cyrus had to get to court shortly before his father's death and find the palace divided between two competing factions. Darius had already announced, probably decades earlier, that his eldest son, Artaxerxes, was going to be his successor. In many ways, the older prince was the only real choice. Artaxerxes was 10 to 20 years older than his younger brother, depending on which historian you read, and had been a fixture of the Persian government for his entire adult life. Cyrus, on the other hand, hadn't even technically reached the age of majority. However, supposedly being an academic and military prodigy, Cyrus had valid experience as Keranos, and more importantly, he had his mom's support. Queen Parysatis was one of the most influential women in the history of the Achaemenid Empire. She's very famous for poisoning and torturing anybody who crossed her, but she also had really significant economic influence, especially in Babylonia. She owned like small countries worth of land dotted around the Middle East.
Listen, she is so clever and ruthless and scary. She's such a good character. Obviously, if I had to live at the time, completely different vibes, believe me. But like reading about her now, you know, with some space in between us, she's so cool and so scary. I love her.
It's good to see how she gets away with everything. That's also the fun
you don't
part.
want to cross her though. You really don't.
Yeah, here's the thing. If you lived at the time, just don't kill her family members. That's really the theme that emerges with a ton of these ancient Persian women who the Greeks said were like, oh, they were so cruel and horrible and they tortured and murdered people. And every time they give an example, it's like, well, yeah, that guy killed his niece. Like,
yeah.
They murdered her daughter as a group. Of course I'm going to kill
yeah, that's going to play a big role here.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Where was I? Parysatis wielded all of this power in violent personal vendettas. What were we just saying? When the Hydarnid family rebelled in Armenia, brutally murdering her eldest daughter, Parysatis directed a gruesome purge of all but a few family members. One of the rebel satrap's sons, who for some reason history doesn't record a name for, Tissaphernes, the satrap of Lydia prior to Cyrus, and Statera, Prince Arsaces' wife, were the only survivors. And for Statera to survive, Darius II had to personally step in and order his queen to spare their daughter-in-law.
I remember this.
Neither woman ever forgave the other, a grudge that seems to have created significant divisions between Parysatis and Prince Arsaces himself, which is probably another reason she liked Cyrus better. In his final weeks of life, Darius II was repeatedly visited by Parysatis, who was not there to offer sympathy to her dying husband, but to demand that he declare Cyrus the Younger heir to the throne. In real history, Darius held to his original decision, which brings us to the first fork in the road. Does Darius II, A, relent and declare Cyrus heir to the throne, or B, stay historical and keep Arsaces as his heir? Get your votes in now. What do you guys think?
I like that we're starting before Canoxa and trying to see how that goes. I I think it's a lot cleaner if Cyrus is just declared king and we go ahead. So I'm one for chaos, but let's see what the audience thinks.
But
Come on, people. Don't let my personal friends be the only ones who actually comment. A or B?
It would be very... I mean, it would really change the tone of whatever we're going to make here if he becomes legitimately a king, or if he has to overthrow his brother later on, like he tried to do twice and failed. So I'm very curious.
I think I can see where the next divergence is if we stay historical, but let's see if I'm correct.
Does he manage it on the first try? Does he manage it on the second try? Does he manage it on the hypothetical third try? Come on.
All right.
Does he just give up?
If Elspeth and Roberto are going to be the only ones who vote here.
Oh, no, we have one more.
Ah, there we go. Thank you, John.
Tiebreaker. Hooray.
All right. Stay historical it is. Ah, you're all being boring.
Wow.
All right. Let me scroll down.
We need to
past
see
that
him
whole
suffer a
section.
little bit, work for it. Work for the throne.
Yeah, if he earns it, then fine, I'll respect him. Otherwise, no.
Okay. You just skipped like 4 pages of this thing. So you decided to stick with real history for now?
Yeah.
Fine. Following Darius II's death, Prince Arsaces was formally declared King Artaxerxes II. The royal court, Cyrus the Younger, and now Queen Mother Parysatis included, traveled to Pasargadae, the palatial guarding complex of Cyrus the Great. Artaxerxes II was supposed to undergo the traditional Achaemenid coronation ritual, but the event was disrupted. Part of the ritual involved the new king entering a sanctuary dedicated to the goddess Anahita, or maybe a similar Elamite goddess at least. He was supposed to reflect before stepping out into public as king for the first time. Next fork in the road, does Artaxerxes A. enter the chamber as planned, only to find an assassin waiting with a dagger? Or B, stay historical and receive a warning that Cyrus was planning on murdering him?
Here I'm more on the direction of, okay, let's get some murder in, so it's not clean anymore. We have a feud at last, but you can see how that goes.
I kind of love that. I had forgotten that he actually, the first attempt is literally a scheme to murder his brother. He's hires an assassin to do this, and then Artaxerxes gets a warning from somebody, and that's why it doesn't
actually
work.
Tissaphernes, wasn't it? It might be. I don't know if I'm misremembering, but yes, it is good times. And who hasn't murdered a few brothers? Come on. It's not like Artaxerxes III absolutely decimates the family.
I routinely wish that I knew more languages. Even right in the middle of the US, I run into Spanish speakers all the time, and my social media always has a little Persian, Arabic, some Dutch, and German. Rosetta Stone does help. It's the most trusted language learning program after all. It's also conveniently available on desktop or on the go as an app, and has some really cool features that truly immerse you in the language you're learning. Just the first steps, like learning a new alphabet and some simple phrases, helped open new doors, and Rosetta Stone is a great choice as the trusted expert in this for 30 years, and millions of users with 25 languages available to learn. They focus on fast language acquisition, without English translations, to help you learn, speak, listen, and think in your new language, while building long-term retention. Their true accent speech recognition also gives feedback on pronunciation, which can be really important for languages like Persian, where how you say something is very important. And on top of being available for desktop and mobile, you have the option to download lessons and take them offline. This is also all available at a steal. You can get lifetime membership, all 25 languages, for 50% off. Don't put off learning that new language. There's no better time than right now to get started. For a very limited time, History of Persia listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. Visit rosettastone.com/today. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 50% off at rosettastone.com/today today. All right, we are getting overwhelming
Nice. I'm glad people
stab Artaxerxes energy in the chat, so I think that's case closed.
Poor lad.
This is good because this is probably my favorite of the alternate versions.
Excited.
Okay. You may actually be surprised that I think this is the best option for the long-term stability of the empire.
Interesting.
Artaxerxes entered the chamber and let out a short gasp as an assassin's blade stabbed into his back. The killer slipped out through whatever door he came in from, and when no king emerged from the sanctuary for a long time, royal guards were sent in to check on the king-to-be, only to find Artaxerxes face down in a pool of blood. One of Cyrus the Younger's servants quickly claimed that he had seen Tissaphernes entering the chamber earlier in the day, and the former satrap was quickly detained.
Very nice. I like that.
As the eldest Achaemenid present, Cyrus himself presided over an impromptu trial for Tissaphernes with the heads of the other great families, and sentenced Tissaphernes to immediate and painful death, handing him over to Queen Persisatis for the specifics.
Very good.
As one does, you know, the expert in murder.
Yeah, see if the ash room is being renovated, that sort of thing.
Oh, God. I forgot about the ash room.
No, he wouldn't get the ash room. He did actual murdering. It wasn't princes who you want to murder but don't want to murder.
Yeah, okay, so actual Catholicism.
Tissaphernes is a member of the family that killed Persisatis' eldest daughter. I think he's getting like the trial of the boats where you get drenched in honey and tortured to death by bugs.
Fun.
Let's see. But of course, just killing Artaxerxes wasn't enough tragedy for the royal family just yet. According to Theseus, Artaxerxes' wife Statera was so distraught by her husband's death that she immediately committed suicide by drinking poison. Whether that's true, and, you know, her husband had just been killed, so it might be, or if it was Persisatis because she hated Statera, as other Greek sources suggest, who can say?
Yeah, who knows? It's not like Theseus was being threatened or had a deadly fear of this woman. It was fine. No worries.
You know, it's a very strange relationship to me. The man was her doctor, and sometimes extremely favorable to her, and other times is like, yeah, she tortured people in the most horrifying ways. And that's just how life is over there.
I love that we have the journals, or the writing of her actual like personal GP, essentially.
Uh-huh.
It's just like it's so random.
It's the biggest shame in the world that it's only known through quotes and a like brief Byzantine summary.
Like, imagine
if
we're waiting
if
for the Herculaneum library.
That's what I want.
Oh, yes.
A succession crisis in this scenario is not totally averted. For the first time in the entire history of the empire, the Achaemenids had to address what you would do if the king's eldest son was dead, but he already had adult sons of his own. Somewhere between 30 and 50 years old, Artaxerxes already had several children, including one young adult son, Darius, who was about 16 at this time. He's only a few years younger than Cyrus himself. The exact details of whatever debate are just as unclear as any other internal politics from the Achaemenid Empire, but Darius had no practical experience, and Cyrus had been governing Anatolia as a military viceroy for 3 years. There is no mention of Darius's death, but he also, Artaxerxes' poisoners got to him, or Cyrus's poisoners even, we don't know.
Can you repeat that last bit? I don't know if it was my connection in particular, but I couldn't catch the whole...
Cut out a second.
No, that's fine. Darius goes missing from our sources, and we don't know if it was just getting shipped off to some province, or if Persisaudus' poisoners got to him, or even if it might have been Cyrus's own poisoners.
I see.
But with all of the competition out of the way, as Artaxerxes' body was being prepared for burial alongside their father, Cyrus himself restarted the coronation rituals at Pasargadae. Traditionally, the new king was dressed in Cyrus the Great's personal robe for the ceremony, but Artaxerxes had just been murdered in it. The accounts differ. Some Greek sources say that Cyrus donned Darius's robes, and it is unclear if they mean his own father or Darius the Great. Others say that Cyrus was determined and wore his namesake's clothing anyway, undergoing the ritual with his brother's bloodstains in tow. Either way, he emerged from the sanctuary of Anahita as Cyrus III, King of Kings. I debated whether or not to give him a regnal name like his father and brother did, but his name was already Cyrus. I mean, come on, how do you get a better Persian name than that?
That's true. I was wondering though if it would be like having a pope called Peter II, where it's it's kind of weird, so you don't want to go there. It's well, I might as well call myself Cambyses III because reasons.
I mean, he was only the second son. There was a solid chance that Artaxerxes would just die of disease at some point anyway. They put him in line of succession with that name.
That's true. It works out.
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, that's
it's like you said, if you have the name Cyrus and you change it for something, come on. Yeah, why would you?
You have the excuse of saying, well, it's what I already had. Not gonna change it. Might as well.
Also, the version of yes, I don't care about this anymore. I don't care that the blood of my literal brother is still on the robes. Just put them on me. Just make me king already. I deserve this.
It's fine. They're crimson anyway. It'll be cool.
I love the unhinged energy.
Well, the extra bit to that is also the real world sources uniformly say that it was Cyrus personally waiting in that chamber with a knife. So
I remember that.
I love that.
He just murdered his brother and then immediately puts on his coat.
I mean, I like that historian, whoever they are. I'm up for it.
But we're now in the reign of King Cyrus III, and the first few years of that reign were going to be relatively peaceful. Tissaphernes was dead, so we need a new satrap of Lydia. And this was Struthus, who was appointed to replace Cyrus. And satrap Pharnabazus II of Phrygia became the new Keranos in the west. Greece was still a very touchy subject. They were going to need military leadership. There were a few minor revolts in central Anatolia with some of the more rural or mountainous tribes, but the alliance with Sparta was keeping Greece quiet for now. New building projects began, incorporating new religious maxims into their inscriptions, but this is the Persian Empire, so we can't actually stay peaceful. That would be boring.
That would be silly. What do you think? Why do you think we have such a big empire? It's to have interesting stuff happening.
Fortunately, Egypt still exists. And
Oh.
if there's one thing Egypt can be relied on to do, it's rebel against the Persians.
Good times.
Listen, if you're ever bored because there's not enough drama, not enough war going on, your military prowess hasn't been proven yet, just take a look at Egypt. Just like, I don't know, just look them the wrong way, just like throw a little bit of something and they will rebel. It's fine. You've got something to do over there.
Yeah, they burst into flames constantly until the Romans, who for some reason apparently gel with them.
I think they were probably just tired at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did all the hard work and then the Romans came in at the last second.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what happens in, like, the Levant Palestine region. They rebel against Assyria every 3 minutes for 300 years, and then by the time the Persians get there, they're like, yeah, okay, this is fine.
Sure. At least we're not being flayed alive. It's cool.
It was the Persian charm. Come on, what are you talking about?
Yes, it was specifically because Cyrus was the Messiah, actually.
Good times.
See? So?
Anyway, Egypt was actually already in revolt when Darius II died. But the wannabe pharaoh Amyrtaeus hadn't made much progress up to that point. That changed in 403 BCE, when the satrap of Egypt was killed defending the ancient capital city of Sais, and Amyrtaeus captured the city to use it as a base of operations. Without that big roadblock in their way, the rebellion started spreading. Initially, Cyrus was hesitant to commit any resources. Egypt rebelled every 15 years or so. Surely this couldn't be that big of a deal. He ordered Abracomes, the satrap of Assyria, to just sail over and deal with it. Except Abracomes couldn't deal with it. He was repelled, and Amyrtaeus started besieging Persian strongholds all over the Nile Delta.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
And this isn't even made up part. That's just what actually happens in both timelines.
Yep.
That's just Egypt itself being a thing.
Based on Babylonian records, we can see that Cyrus raised a small army from the heartland provinces before heading to the Levant in 401 BCE. He met up with Pharnabazus and a contingent of Greek mercenaries, including Clearchus, a rogue Spartan general who'd been camped out in Thrace for the last few years, and even an official Spartan force led by a general named Thibron, who recruited a bunch of Sparta's serf slaves called the Helots to serve as infantry, and 300 Athenian cavalry, including a young officer named Xenophon, who wrote about this in his Palestica, a sadly lost text describing northwestern Egypt and Palestine.
Oh, shame.
Another one of the lost ones.
He never made it back, got lost somewhere. Happened.
To be clear for the audience, there is no Palestica, but I imagine there would be something like that in this case.
Love it.
Cyrus, Thibron, and the land army crossed the Sinai Peninsula, while Pharnabazus and Clearchus commanded the fleet. Their arrival forced Amyrtaeus to break off his current siege and meet them for a battle outside the city of Mendes. According to Xenophon, the Greek cavalry charged single-handedly, forcing the Egyptians to run away in terror, though the tiny Greek contingent was almost certainly surrounded by Persian horsemen.
Yeah, those are details. Don't question it. It's fine. There were Greeks in it. It's cool.
That's why they won, because they were Greek. No other explanation.
It's the Spartan strategy. Just be surrounded by other people, and then you can win.
Amyrtaeus was killed on the battlefield, supposedly by Pharnabazus himself, after the naval forces landed and helped out the army. But the great king was actually wounded by an Egyptian archer, whose arrow pierced Cyrus's shoulder, and he had to be treated by his mother's personal physician, another Greek named Theseus.
Here we go.
Timely action had secured Egypt for another generation of Achaemenid rulers. Can you even imagine what would have happened if they'd just ignored Egypt for another few years? It would have been a disaster.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe the Macedonians would have gotten uppity.
Yeah, and like try to get it back from them. a whole
Egypt
mess,
could have
honestly.
succeeded, and like how it's unimaginable, obviously.
Yeah. Imagine the Western satraps, what they would have thought. It's a whole thing.
To honor their successes, Pharnabazus was allowed to marry Cyrus's niece, one of Arsaces and Statera's daughters. He was also promoted to become the new satrap of Egypt, while his son, Ariobarzanes, took up the reins in Hellespontine Phrygia. Clearchus was made the tyrant of the Greek colony city of Naucratis in northern Egypt, and Cyrus went home to resume his normal duties as king. While the Persians were occupied in Egypt, Evagoras, the king of Salome, was over on Cyprus, conquering most of his neighbors on the Big Island. Even worse, he wasn't paying his taxes.
You.
On his way home, Pharnabazus was ordered to put a stop to this, and so he arrived at Salome with a letter from King Cyrus demanding the vassal resume tribute payments and go back to the old status quo on the island with 10 independent kings. Evagoras attempted to negotiate, saying that he would happily start paying taxes again but not give up conquered territory. Pharnabazus said he wasn't there to negotiate and immediately besieged Salome. He landed on the
Technical problems, everybody. We love it.
Actions.
We love to see it. This is what you get when you come to a live event.
Hello, Trevor.
Hello, Trevor.
Okay.
Yes, we were landing on
I don't know what
Cyprus.
happened.
Your connection was a bit wobbly.
Maybe it still is.
To be fair, the stream is running through his computer, so, might be taking a toll.
Okay, looks like maybe you're back. There you are. Okay.
Knock on wood.
Okay, it says my connection is fine. Where did you lose me?
Okay. Should
second
work.
We were landing.
We were landing on Cyprus.
Yes.
Authority to convince Evagoras' allies to come back into the Persian fold. He then sent those ships to blockade Evagoras' port. The Cypriot fleet was outnumbered 3-1 and just couldn't put up with the force of Spartan mercenaries, Persian sailors, and no allies to speak of.
Understandable.
In either late 401 or early 400, Evagoras slipped out under cover of night and fled to Athens in exile. Pharnabazus installed a new Phoenician called Matanes as king of Cypriot Salome, and then went home to enjoy his new position in Egypt.
Okay, everything's working out pretty well for Cyrus so far. I'm impressed and skeptical.
See,
Listen,
that's the thing
there's
with this option
time.
where he just gets to murder his brother, is there's no big civil war to fight about it.
Yeah,
So
that's
all
true.
of the
You don't
things-
have to divert the army for Egypt to fight your brother. You can now just point it to Egypt and say that way. Go
So
stab those people
all of
real
these
good.
big distractions don't happen, and with Egypt, you don't have because Cyrus is king instead of Artaxerxes. You don't have the Spartans invading out of spite for the next 5 years.
That's true. That
Am
it always
I-
helps.
Am I getting that maybe Cyrus should have succeeded in murdering his brother? Like, what is happening? Why
I
are
think
I'm
things
sure he'll
better?
mess it up further down.
I think if Cyrus were going to try and become king and not just accept the fact that his brother was older, the ideal scenario was probably just killing Artaxerxes outright in the first place.
I mean, yeah, if he was going to try and kill him anyway, yeah, the ideal scenario is you succeed in doing so. You know.
And just a heads up to the audience, yes, we are obviously going to run a bit long. I know that some of you have tickets for the Q&A afterwards, but it's not a ton of people, so I am going to let this keep going in this feed for a bit longer. But you fortunately also picked the shortest alternate timeline. So
Oh, cool. Efficiency.
But of course,
Hey.
I have all of the different versions of Canaxa in the middle here, so I have to scroll through all of the aftermath of that before I can get to the next section.
Canax is like, where different numbers of soldiers get lost on the battlefield and eventually stab different people.
Exactly.
Some of Cyrus's soldiers get off and kill Artaxerxes.
So now we have to discuss Cyrus's actual government. He'd proven himself in battle, fighting outside of Mendes. He had become king by definitely not murdering his own brother and assassinating any other competitors. Now he actually had to be a king. And one of the most important jobs of the Great King was making sure that there would be more Great Kings in the future. So Cyrus had to get married to a nice Persian girl and settle down to have some princes and princesses. Historically, Artaxerxes II was obviously already married with multiple heirs when he was coronated. Cyrus was definitely not, which isn't weird considering he left home at 15 and was 22 by the time the Civil War was over.
Fair enough.
It was good time for that, you know.
Is any wife going to be good enough for Parasatis? Is anybody being good enough for her boy?
Absolutely
that is very true.
Not, but she does recognize that they have to make do, and we'll get there. Cyrus did have at least one Greek concubine at this point, the so-called Aspasia the Wise. However, tradition and loosely defined Persian law demanded that the king take a Persian wife so that her sons could be the foremost heirs to the throne. So the question is, who does Cyrus marry? A, the daughter of one of his satraps, B, one of his brother's daughters, or C, all three of his brother's eldest daughters?
Please, come on.
I mean, I think Plan C is the best Achaemenid plan. Basically saying, that's fine, we don't care, consanguinity, what is that? It'll be cool. Did they have any sisters left? I'm seeing Roberto suggesting. I don't remember. I think there was. I don't know if they had any
He's not a sister. Well,
well, fortunately for Roberto, they did, but they were also probably like literal children still.
Okay, fair.
So, if the goal is to produce an heir, that's not really going to be the right call. Even if like there are political reasons to say no, they're not allowed to marry anybody else in the future, that's not the right call in the moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know, guys, I just released an episode where I talked all about Artaxerxes marrying his daughters. So like,
yeah, fun.
We've had sister wives before. That is not the worst case scenario here.
I mean, we released an episode where we had a sister married to all three of her brothers. And
oh God, she does not get a break. So Laudike.
It's very messy.
Right. Got one for C.
Caligula.
Elspeth wants other options.
The history of Persia is intertwined with conquest. It began with conquest when Cyrus, king of a small city called Anshan, set out to build the greatest empire the world had ever seen. In a series of stunning campaigns, he achieved just that, becoming one of the greatest conquerors in history, and basically started Persian history. After all, you don't get the title the Great for nothing. But he wouldn't be the last great Persian conqueror. Other Persian rulers like Darius the Great, Mithridates I, and Ardashir I would go on to become great conquerors on their own, establishing their own great empires and legacies. If you want to hear their story, and the stories of other great conquerors, many of whom are far less famous despite their great achievements, join me, Ramzi Shalah, on my podcast, The Conquerors Podcast, available on all platforms you listen through.
2 for C, 1 for A.
There's another
2
probably
for
A.
Well, I'm seeing C has 3 votes.
No,
C
please,
has-
someone
C-
Someone
Maximum
save us.
chaos. Go.
I
Nope.
vote for option A, please.
Maximum
People-
chaos, but also
C is the
stability.
worst.
Come on.
C is the
There's no
worst
alternative.
option.
Rivals.
Oh, why?
we're still C leading by 1, even factoring in your votes. So C wins.
Sad.
Cyrus is going to
I'm done
marry all
here.
3 of his brother's eldest daughters.
Yay.
Here's the thing. This is fairly mild incest by Achaemenid standards.
That doesn't make it better.
The nephew, it's cool. What are you doing?
And all of these women would have been roughly Cyrus's age. It's like, it's not like Darius the Great being roughly 20 or 30 and marrying Bardia's daughter, who was maybe half that.
Yeah. But that's Darius the Great.
Or Cambyses marrying Cyrus's youngest child. Like,
Yeah. Not great.
following Cyrus's ascension, the Persian Empire was on its shakiest foundation since Darius the Great's coup 120 years earlier. His kingship was at least mildly contested from the start. There was a revolt in Egypt, and recent decades had shown that ambitious satraps would seize any perceived weaknesses to rebel. The empire needed to be strong, and any potential royal rival had to be averted. According to Theseus, the new king married 3 of his nieces at Paris-Sodus's urging.
Yeah, because one wasn't enough, apparently.
Keep that blood pure. She married a half-brother. What are you going to do?
The Greek physician tells us that this spurned several satraps who had been hoping for a royal alliance themselves, but Cyrus gave in to his mother's advice to solidify the dynasty and eliminate competing claims to the throne. Strictly speaking, it is possible there were other daughters of Artaxerxes II that we just don't know about, but these are the 3 that we do. They were Roxana, Apama, and Oka. Based on the ages of their father and brothers, they would have been close to Cyrus, with Oka maybe just a little bit younger, in her late teens. Within a few years, a new prince was born to Apama named Artamades, Cyrus III's first son and presumed heir.
Okay.
If you're wondering where that name came from, I dug into 4th century Achaemenid papyrus records and picked one.
As one does.
Very good. I mean, you could also just have chosen one out of like 4.
Well, see, that's the thing. I was gonna do that, but I was like, well, you're not gonna name him Darius, because that's like all 3 Dariuses came to power illegitimately. So that's probably not right.
I think that's sort of what you need to do to become a Darius. That's the necessity.
Then you get like Artaxerxes. Well, that's not gonna fly.
Not great.
And what, you're gonna name him Cambyses? Xerxes?
Bardia.
Like, they're really
the best
down
king.
to like something new, or Cyrus. Like,
Can't wait for one of them to inherit the throne and immediately change the name. Because that's...
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can see a Cyrus streak instead of an Artaxerxes streak going on if this goes well.
That's fair, yeah.
Your powers of prediction
Nice.
are terrifying. Obviously, their marriages and partners were never going to be the same, but many of the other domestic projects under Cyrus III would have to be pretty similar to those from Artaxerxes II in real-world history. The Apadana halls at Susa and Ecbatana were falling apart and needed to be rebuilt. And Persepolis saw renewed construction to build Cyrus's tomb, as the old necropolis at Nakhche Rostam was just too full for new tombs.
Okay.
These new building projects led to renewed Old Persian inscriptions, including some new names, the gods Anahita and Mithra. Without turning this into one of my very lengthy religion episodes, because we're already an hour deep, suffice to say that Artaxerxes II's real-world religious changes were very similar to what we could expect the third. Even though they aren't mentioned in royal inscriptions, Anahita and Mithra had both become increasable gods in other contexts, like people's names and temples built in other places. There's even possibly one example of a temple to Zeus associated with some Persian nobles in Lydia that scholars think might be an idolatrous temple to Ahura Mazda. During his time as Keranos, Cyrus personally sponsored the construction of a temple in Sardis dedicated to the Persian Artemis, which probably just means Anahita. So some historians attribute this to the increasing importance and of Babylonian influence on the royal family. That makes sense, since Darius II and Parysatis were both half Babylonian, and they spent a lot of time living there. With her very favorite special boy as king, Parysatis was only ever going to be more influential. So the question is, does Cyrus stay historical in these new religious practices, or embrace idol worship even harder?
Okay. I feel like, my idea is go for the even harder. Just go for the more cosmopolitan option. Parysatis is going to be following that, we might even finally restore the Temple of Marduk that's been in a state for a while, so that'd be nice. I'm sure Mom would like it.
In the end, who are we kidding? This is not Cyrus's decision, this is Parysatis' decision.
There is an element of that where there's a section later where I do account for how that's
because or else.
Yes.
All right, everyone's saying more idol worship. All right, here we go.
Perfect choice.
In addition to referencing them in his inscriptions, Cyrus sent funds and orders out to many. See, this is what you get for idol worship, everybody. Your internet gets cut out.
Can you please repeat, Trevor? You were jittery.
Yes, let's see. He sent funds to the empire's major cities to construct lavished sanctuaries to his gods. Anahita, Mithra, and even Ahura Mazda received temples and statues in Sardis, Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, Ecbatana, and even Bactra. This was seemingly controversial, as an inscription in the Grand Temple at Persepolis records how Cyrus caused these lands to embrace the truth and reject the lie in this sanctuary and other sanctuaries.
I'm
and
sure
later
Xerxes
events
is spinning
saw
his
the temple. Just move in the Diva inscription into the temple.
Exactly.
Later events saw the temples in the north sacked and destroyed, which probably doesn't bode well for their popularity. And fun fact about the list of cities, this is an actual list of cities of where Artaxerxes II built temples just to Anahita, according to Berosus. One thing that hasn't come up yet, but has to be very different under our hypothetical Cyrus III, is the issue of Greece. There's a very, very important difference in the new timeline, though. Cyrus was on good terms with Sparta, and not just any good terms. He was their explicit ally and personal friends with a lot of important Spartans. No Artaxerxes, and no working actively to weaken outside influence in Anatolia, eliminates the issue of Spartan invasion in the 390s, and by extension, the massive distraction of that war. However, it's still Greece. They're still going to fight each other. Don't worry.
What did you expect?
Fine.
Let's
The
see how it
Spartans
goes.
find a way to make themselves disliked. The Thebans are hungry.
I really see no reason that the timeline would end up being all that different. As in real life, the Thebans provoked a war with Sparta using smaller cities as proxies around 395, eventually leading to all-out war. between Thebes, Athens, Argos, and Corinth, and Sparta's Peloponnesian League. Cyrus doesn't have an invading army to get out of his territory, and is actually happy with Sparta. But he still had a choice to make when the Corinthian War started. Does he maintain his support for his Spartan friends, or embrace realpolitik to try and weaken Greece overall?
Realpolitik, and not just because I loathe Sparta
Interesting.
generally.
I mean, they are funny though. I love the Spartans just being like, yeah, I'm totally gonna take part in this. Just like I need to see who's winning first, and then I will decide.
Right? You know, that works.
Also, like, are we gonna have Cyrus like just be like, yeah, we're best buddies now, and just like continue throwing gasoline into the fire, or is he gonna be like, top 10 anime betrayals by Sparta? You're no longer of use to me. I don't need you.
See, the thing is, we're getting solid votes for realpolitik, and I appreciate that one's obviously more interesting. I only really put it in here to give two choices. I don't think it's what he realistically would have done, because he was a big Spartan simp. He loved everybody he ever met from that city.
Yeah.
It's just
I mean,
not
if he was
credible.
smart, he was gonna do this. But otherwise,
But you support your homies. What?
Yeah.
You don't understand.
All right, realpolitik.
Hell
It is.
uprising now.
Yeah, let's make him smart.
Cyrus initially spent the first several years of the Corinthian War trying to keep Greece at arm's length. As predicted, Athenian ships arrived on the Hellespont basically instantly to wrestle control of the Black Sea grain trade out of Spartan hands. When they attempted to attack Abydos on the Persian side of the strait, the Persian governor there responded and said if they attack any Persian territory, it would be all-out war with Persia. The message was loud and clear, and the Greeks backed off. That didn't stop Ionian cities from going into revolt in hopes of Athenian support, but so long as Athens didn't... I don't know what the problem is. My computer and my phone say that my connection is great.
Weird. Anyway, so long
Alright.
as Athens doesn't.
If they attacked any Persian territory whatsoever, it would be all-out war. The message was received loud and clear. The Ionian Greeks revolted a few times, but without Athenian support, the Persian governors were more than capable of dealing with it. The city of Sestos on the Hellespont fell relatively quickly, but Byzantium was a harder target. The Athenian fleet came and went year after year trying to take the city for a few months before rushing back to Greece to deal with some Spartan attack closer to home. Remember, in this version of events, there's no Persian king dumping money into either side of the war, so both of their fleets are kind of ramshackle at this point.
No sponsorship.
Corinth's geographic position, controlling the isthmus that connected Sparta to the rest of Greece, locked the two sides into a stalemate for most of the 390s. Sparta theoretically had more money and more military force, but they couldn't attack any of their enemies by land, and they weren't great with ships. After a few years of constant fighting and the loss of the Black Sea grain trade, even the ships they did have started to fall into disrepair or were just sunk by the Athenians. King Agesilaus of Sparta repeatedly sent messengers demanding that Cyrus III honor the old alliance, even sending Cyrus's personal friend Lysander to negotiate. But Cyrus insisted that it was a purely Greek affair, or at least, as Xenophon puts it, his eunuch servants insisted that it was a purely Greek affair, and Cyrus refused to see them.
Good move.
Yeah,
like
Which
it.
seems perfectly plausible to me.
I mean, he seems the type entirely. He seems to just stop them along the way, say, yes, please go home. This is the answer, bye.
I do not have time for this. I'm a busy man.
The winds shifted in 393 when Sparta accepted an offer from the short-lived rebel pharaoh in Egypt, Neferud, also called Nepherites I. They would trade money for grain, supporting the Egyptian revolt, and getting food to feed themselves because Athens still had the Black Sea. Simultaneously, Sparta's allies in Sicily had just finished their own war against Carthage and were finally able to reinforce the Spartan fleet. Sparta was able to capture Corinth's primary port city, but not the city itself. But with these reinforcements, Agesilaus turned Sparta's full attention to Argos, their only enemy in the Peloponnese, and besieged the city. For the very first time in centuries of intermittent Spartan wars with their northeastern neighbor, Argos actually fell to a Spartan governor. The loss of their primary ally and only port in the region was a major threat to the anti-Spartan coalition. The Spartans were able to turn their full attention to Corinth, and the coalition sent envoys to Persia begging Cyrus for help. Pressed by his advisors, or Xenophon says it was all Parysatis' idea, Cyrus was forced to act. He provided 10,000 darics to fund the anti-Spartan coalition and sent satrap Struthus out from Lydia with the Persian fleet. The funds were enough for the coalition to hire additional mercenaries and for Athens to start rebuilding its defensive walls. The threat of direct Persian naval intervention in Argos or even the Spartan homeland was enough to bring Sparta to the negotiating table. Greece was effectively divided into 4 parts. The kings of Thessaly, who were Spartan allies, all went back to whatever they were doing before. Athens and Thebes were reaffirmed as democracies, dominant in their respective regions, and Sparta was forced to relinquish any claim it had on territory outside the Peloponnese. However, unlike the historical King's Peace, there's no condition that they're not allowed to fight each other anymore.
Okay. You can keep burning as long as it doesn't bug us. It'll be cool.
The only condition for Cyrus's mediation was that they limit their ambitions to contiguous territory by land or the islands of the Aegean Sea, and stop seeking to govern cities far outside of their local area.
Seriously, guys, stop bothering us. I'm telling you.
The Greeks called it the Peace of Cyrus, and it led to the re-establishment of many defensive pacts between Greek cities in places like the Balkans to defend themselves from Thracian aggression in the absence of strong naval powers.
Good.
Interesting.
And now we get to the last big, really fun one.
Oh dear.
What you don't know, because you aren't able to participate in it from a distance, is that as all of these decisions have been made, each of them are assigned a point value.
Ooh.
And these will be used to determine the scale of the Great Satraps Revolt.
Oh, love that. Very good.
In the real world, King Artaxerxes II watched the Western Empire tear itself apart as struggles to retake Egypt and years of heavy militarization and with a surplus of Greek mercenaries led to the Great Satraps Revolt in Anatolia. Under King Cyrus III, this probably would not happen. His Hellenophile tendencies and strong connection to Anatolia would help secure that region and ensure that Egypt was retaken sooner rather than later. And we happen to have picked the version of events where Egypt is taken back more or less immediately.
Mhm.
It is pretty unlikely that the empire just sits around happy and comfortable for decades and decades. And many of Cyrus's greatest strengths, like being an impulsive military leader, could also be his greatest weaknesses. While his reign would probably protect the West, the East was a different issue. A hypothetical reign of Cyrus III involves a fair amount of chaos in the Iranian provinces, whether that came from controversial politics, tyrannical rule, deposing their satraps in favor of ones who didn't like his brother more, or just lingering accusations of illegitimacy. There would still be a massive revolt, but what form that took depends on how unpopular Cyrus was. The year is now 355 BCE. Much like the Artaxerxes II timeline, Cyrus had ruled through a chaotic but generally successful stretch of history. Now he was getting old, and his subordinates rose up against him. He's not quite as old as Artaxerxes II was for his version of this. He's 68 instead of like mid-70s or early 90s, but 68 is pretty late in life to deal with the biggest war you've ever seen.
Yeah, at that point you might just be like,
But
listen,
rather
guys,
not.
can we pretend nobody saw that and just like, let me retire first?
Just barely squeaking over the threshold from the least disastrous version to the middle tier, we are going with the mid-level option because Cyrus married all of his brother's daughters.
Perfect.
So this is what you get, people.
This is
Why?
what you get. Constantly
Any other
remember.
option in that list would have put you in the bottom tier where everything is mostly okay.
Well, we don't want that to happen. That would be boring.
The revolt began in Artaxerxes, the intersection of modern Iran and Afghanistan, where the satrap Artaxerxes was a descendant of Arsaces on his mother's side. His exact motives are unclear, but shifting religious norms might have played a role, given that that region holds traditional importance in Zoroastrianism. His descent from the elder brother probably also played an important role in inspiring confidence. However, the first ally that he came to was the satrap of Gandhara, which was more religiously mixed, so who knows. Initially, their rebellion was left as a local issue, but an important one since Gandhara controlled Achaemenid access to India. Things escalated the next year as the rebellion spread to Drangiana and Arya, essentially encompassing most of central and eastern Iran. But more importantly, satrap Akhva Mazda of Bactria joined the rebellion. The historian Soren Stark described the satrap of Bactria as a type of vice king of the east, and his rebellion meant disaster. Except, I always struggle to believe that because the satraps of Bactria revolt almost as often as Egypt, and it never seems to cause that big a problem.
I mean, Bactria is fine, You just don't need to get bogged down in the mountains and it'll be cool.
But working with more or less the historical consensus, Cyrus scrambled to recruit a royal army and oppose them. He was too old to want to ride a horse out into the middle of a battlefield anymore, so he sent Prince Artaxerxes, by now a tried and tested commander, along with Artaxerxes, the satrap of Media. Artaxerxes went north, clashing with the rebel offensive in Parthia, and pushing them back. Meanwhile, Artaxerxes had to work his way across the dry highlands and deserts of central Iran into Drangiana and Artaxerxes. Unfortunately, because this is all in the east, there just can't be as many details, even if I'm making them up.
Oh.
But most of the war was probably fought in a series of pitched, cavalry-heavy battles outside of the main cities. Iran itself was not fortified against an invading army because the Achaemenids didn't really expect there to ever be one. Bactria, Artaxerxes, and Gandhara were different. They were border regions, and the latter two were very mountainous. They had lots of fortresses and few roads, which meant the royal army sent by Cyrus got bogged down in sieges for years on end, slowly picking their way through the hills, and one of the most fortified provinces of the empire.
Not great.
Bactra and Harivata, the Aracosian capital city, seem to have fallen around the same time, but both armies still had to deal with territory beyond. Artaxerxes continued up north into Sogdia, and Artaxerxes crawled his way through Gedrosia, trying to reach the Indus Valley.
Ooh.
At the end of the war in 348 BCE, Cyrus III could still claim both regions on a list of territories inscribed on his tomb. But the reality of the situation is more unclear. The conflict would probably see Persians losing control over the Indus Valley forever, and likely more independent nomadic steppe peoples up in the northeast, which means more raiders coming out of the steppe.
Yeah, tough times. But, could be worse. We didn't really own India anyway. It's cool. The Mauryas are coming. It'll work out. It'll work itself out.
Yeah. I wish we knew when we stopped owning India, though, because, there's really regular contact in Darius the Great's time, and then it just kind of goes away.
Then it's in the list. Is it really in the list? Does it pretend in the list? Who knows? Just keep going.
And that brings me finally to our epilogue. We made it. We're only 50% longer than intended. That's pretty good. That's usually how my scripts go. Initially, I had intended to offer you another choice here by picking how old Cyrus would be when he died, but in the process of writing all this, I realized it doesn't matter. Assuming he wasn't assassinated, Cyrus would have lived to be old. Historically, Artaxerxes was either in his late 70s or early 90s, and Parysatis lived somewhere between 80 and 100 years. That's just the only way to make her fit with all the events she's described in and be Artaxerxes II's mom.
Excellent woman.
Ridiculous.
And those are numbers I come to by saying she gave birth at 15. That is the absolute widest range I can give.
Minimum, yeah.
And if she still hits 100 years old.
God.
Basically, every Achaemenid who got to die of natural causes was old as hell. But whether Cyrus dies at 77 or 95, he was too old to really take a personal, active role in the final events of our timeline.
So what I'm hearing is we can let the audience decide the actual number, just so we can rank it, because it doesn't matter.
Oh, that's true. Since we do know how old he was when he became king, we have to know how old he was when he died.
Yes, we could.
All right, everybody.
Does he beat Shapur the second?
Pick a number between 77 and 95. Put it in the chat. When Cyrus III died, his son Artamades succeeded, and I like to imagine he would have become King Cyrus IV. I can't really imagine any other options, like we discussed earlier.
No, it makes sense.
Artaxerxes was kind of poisoned for the whole fratricide thing, and, nobody's going to pick Bardia or Cambyses. Even if their dad was Cyrus. That's the wrong message.
Yeah, you're not sending a message of it's going to end well, but yeah.
But Artamades is also pretty old at this point. He's in his late 50s, or, depending on how old Cyrus goes, up to his early 70s.
Oh no.
In the long run, this is a real risk for destabilizing the empire. They might, if he's in his early 70s, they might get lucky and have Artamades die quickly and pass it on to a younger heir. But if he lives as long as his father, imagine if the modern British royal family were absolute monarchs and everyone in the direct line of succession right now was going to govern. Until somebody was assassinated or died of unnatural causes otherwise, they were on track for one elderly king after another.
Yeah, not a great recipe for the times ahead.
Eventually, somebody was guaranteed to exploit this to depose an elderly king and claim the throne as a spry and impressive young warrior. It was just bound to happen. But before we all check out, we're going to say, based on the chat, he was 84, since that's the number that gets closest to having more than one suggestion. And
Nice.
The way that dates work in the ancient world, it's sometimes unclear and easier to side with the older one.
Sounds reasonable. And he took the throne at 22, was it?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that's 62 years of reign, the second longest reign in pre-Islamic Iranian history.
Well, no, I think the way we did it, he's actually
Is he not?
Older. Let me double check that. No, 22. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yes, 62 years of reign, second longest
Not bad.
of, I think, all Iranian history. Let me check my timeline.
Impressive.
Yes, second oldest of all
Yeah,
Iranian
probably.
history. So good stuff.
But the rank, I know there's one question that everybody wants to know the answer to. What happens to Alexander the Great?
Yes.
And this is not actually something where I have us set up for the audience to pick. It's actually determined based on what happened with Greece. Obviously, the politics of Greece are going to change a lot about what happened in Macedonia.
Yeah, definitely.
You did pick the version where Alexander the Great probably still exists. By taking a less completely domineering approach to the real Artaxerxes II, Cyrus III probably provided more stability for Greece in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't de facto vassals of the king, but allowing them to compete and conquer with one another, but giving them stipulations on how and where they're allowed to do that, would be far more effective than saying, nobody's allowed to fight anybody anymore, no conquering at all, and then not intervening immediately when somebody starts conquering. Because they're all able to compete for territory and kind of clustered into these little regional groups now, Greece starts forming kind of smaller, centralized states, but larger than city-states. They're still theoretically based on the polis, and they're still theoretically just whatever regional league, but they start looking a lot more like countries. Theban-Macedonian relations probably play out pretty similar in this version of events, with Thessaly trying to intervene in Macedon, and then Thebes intervening in Thessaly because the Macedonians asked for help. That's what eventually leads to Philip II being a ward of the Theban government at its height, and also would have prevented Greek alliances from having to compete in the mainland region with groups like the Odrysian Thracians. Without things like Sparta and Athens in Thracian politics, Thrace is probably a lot more stable. That means that they're able to take Greek port cities that don't really have a good regional league to join up with, and the Thracians get a lot wealthier, making them a much harder enemy to target for Philip when he gets around to being king and conquering everything that he can reach. Basically, everything that Philip wanted to conquer in this timeline is stronger, which means that it's going to take more time and more effort, and might not even happen entirely in his lifetime. Though it also still might, because if you break through one Greek thing, they all tend to fall apart.
Might live longer.
Cyrus's more stable version of Anatolia, not disturbed by Spartan invasion, repeated failures in Egypt, or a great revolt, got to keep its mercenary armies, and wasn't fragmented into a bunch of extra satrapies to try and deal with the political problems there. As a result, the satraps of the Northwest are probably better prepared to deal with some kind of Greek invasion in this timeline than ours. There's also no Achaemenid succession crisis all of a sudden in the 330s, with rapid-fire deaths of Artaxerxes III and IV, which means that Artamades/Cyrus IV is secure on his throne and much more willing to intervene when the Macedonians show up. If the new Alexander is anything like the old Alexander, he still invades, he still conquers territory, but it's probably a whole lot harder. He might even make it into Levant. If he gets all the way to Egypt, Egypt is gone. There's no way getting around that. If somebody is going to hold territory between Persia and Egypt, there's no chance.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
But I don't see him making it past this timeline's version of the Battle of Gaugamela, and I don't even really think that this timeline's version of Issus is all that likely to be a Macedonian victory. I see him carving off Anatolia, but probably not a whole lot else.
Yeah, basically Philip's old plan, just limit yourself to what you can realistically hold and not have it explode after you die.
And over time, you've got this new Macedonian Empire right on the border. Egypt probably gets another chance to break away. What was going to happen? Well, we know that there was increasing trouble with the Saka in the real timeline from the Aramaic documents from Bactria, and with a great satrap's revolt in the east, that probably just gets worse. There's also not much that this new version of history would do to stop the rise of Chandragupta Maurya over in India. He was supposedly a mostly legitimate claimant to the Nanda Empire, and the only source that remotely suggests Western politics played a role in his success is completely apocryphal. Eventually, wars were going to start in the West, whether that's Macedon or some other Greek state or Egypt or Cyprus. It was going to happen. Eventually, there was going to be a rival empire in India. And with additional chaos and conflict in the east, defenses against the steppe were going to be weakened. The Dahai Confederacy, which includes the Parni tribe that eventually built the Parthian Empire in our timeline, was the most centralized and threatening example that we know of, and we know they fought with Alexander in the early Seleucids. All of these storms and wars were still on the horizon. By the late 340s, no matter who was king, Cyrus III may have bought the height, the golden age of the Achaemenid Empire a few extra decades, but the world around them was on the move, and over time that world was going to be chipped away. It's entirely possible in this version of events that some version of the Achaemenid family still ruled Western Iran and Babylonia for much longer with the benefit of a more stable family, but nothing lasts forever, and that includes the sole world power status of the Persian Empire.
Very nice. I like this ending. We get to have more Achaemenids. That's always fun.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, and there's other what ifs where you can do that. Like, what if Artaxerxes III wasn't an idiot and killed his scheming advisor when he had the chance or something like that? But really anything that averts Artaxerxes III's assassination in any form.
It's mostly the absolutely colossal succession crisis that makes everything a mess. And it's like, okay, cool, let's deal with this now. This is the end. Or we can have the fantasy version with Rome fighting the Achaemenids, which is also fun, because why not? They do use a lot of outdated Achaemenid terminology for the Parthians, so might as well.
I do want to address...
They already think that they're Achaemenids.
Before we do the ranking, I do want to address Hal's question in the chat, just because it's something that bugs me when people suggest it. What is Alexander going to conquer in the Mediterranean? The Gauls?
Yeah.
There's nothing... Italy is a bunch of little tiny city-states just like Greece at this time. And in between him and Italy are a bunch of, unsettled or, rural village-dwelling tribal cultures. And Macedon's not a naval power. There's nowhere for him to go with any...
Yeah, you can't just attack Carthage with the Macedonian navy and just hope that'll go well.
If a different Greek power... This is something I didn't get into because it's too hard to predict. If, Athens became ascendant again and, conquered a large part of Greece, then I could see things getting interesting in the West because they'd probably sail over to Sicily, which would bring them in.
You could have Sicily in the middle, Carthage, do some Cyrenaica business.
But I don't know how to predict that version of history.
It's another show entirely.
There's just nothing I can imagine that would induce Alexander to want to go northwest into Central Europe instead of right across the pond, the little tiny Aegean Sea, to the wealthiest place he'd ever heard of.
Yeah. Also, Alexander of Epirus didn't do a great job when he tried it. He's not Alexander the Great, but still. It ended poorly.
He did have a slightly different context by the time with Rome. But just addressing that because it's a pet peeve, let's rank Cyrus III.
Okay, very nice. I'll need to get 3 scores in, but I will do the complicated math necessary.
Shout out to Clarendon for supporting this episode and providing me with samples. Allergies. There are few things that make me feel worse more frequently. There are a few times a year when the trees bloom, pollen turns everything yellow, and my sinuses just seem to stop working. I feel miserable. I can't sleep without tossing and turning every few minutes. Luckily for those of us who live with the symptoms of allergies, we can live Claritin Clear with Claritin D. Designed for serious allergy sufferers, Claritin D has 2 powerful ingredients in just one pill that relieve your allergy symptoms and decongest your nose so you can breathe better. I've been taking Claritin D for my worst allergy symptoms for probably 18 years, and it's an absolute game changer. I can fall asleep and still feel like I am able to breathe. Ready to live life as if you don't have allergies? It's time to live Claritin Clear. Fast and powerful relief is just a quick trip away. Find Claritin D at the pharmacy counter. Ask for Claritin D at your local pharmacy counter. You don't even need a prescription. Go to Claritin.com right now for a discount so you can live Claritin Clear. Use as directed.
So, first category is final moments. How interesting was his death at like 84, I think we decided. Presumably
Not
in a
at all.
relatively peaceful time.
What happened? He just passed away of old age?
Yeah, old age, I think,
Yeah,
was
like,
the consensus.
I could have invented something for him, but, like, I just didn't see, it would just be something completely pulled out of a hat. Which is how a lot of them die, but, like, I didn't know how to write that into a prediction. That is the one way where I kind of handicapped him.
Yeah, happens.
Well,
So-
does anyone want to suggest a more interesting? Maybe we can do. Listen. I have an idea. Okay, so you know how sometimes we have like conflicting sources of someone else who like either really liked this king or really disliked this king, and how like someone will be like, oh yeah, probably, one of the sources says this happened, like a relatively boring death happened, but then there's some wild source from some years after that is like, no, listen, there's this whole story about how he like got stabbed while on his horse while they were going on to another quest, and then like his corpse was taken into a city and like propped up so that people wouldn't know, and there's all of these theories. So if the audience wants to suggest like an alternative death that we might or might not consider legitimate, I'd be happy to hear it.
While waiting for audience responses, I will suggest one, because what I tried to do here is, copy or at least take inspiration from some real historical events.
Okay.
And one thing I can see happening in this version is at least a story about how Artaxerxes assassinated his father. Because good God, he was old and Artaxerxes just couldn't wait to be king. Which is basically what Prince Darius attempted to do for Artaxerxes II in real life. But he was dumb and got caught.
Yeah, there was the whole hiding behind the curtain scene. That was good stuff. I can see some sort of like a younger brother would be poetic justice. A younger brother comes off and smothers him with a pillow or something.
Yes.
John says he's struck by lightning.
Struck by lightning is
Yes!
classic.
Yes! This is what I'm talking about.
Yes, actually, you know what? There was another struck by lightning story in a podcast I listened to recently. That was the point, Elspeth. Yes, okay. So, according to most sources, Cyrus III died peacefully in his bed at the age of 84, but according to at least one Greek chronicle, only preserved in the Suda, that late Byzantine encyclopedia,
Deep cut.
he was riding through Persepolis as part of a procession with a spear and was struck by lightning at the head of the procession, which was considered an ill omen.
You know,
I mean,
it might be.
it
a
doesn't
hero.
get much
You never
worse.
know.
It doesn't get much worse than that. Literally
enough.
struck from a lightning bolt
You're right.
from the sky.
Good points in the chat that we did make him an idolatrous heathen, so...
True. Yeah. That works. Sure.
Excellent.
Yes, excellent. I am completely on board with this.
So,
Okay. So
actual probable
how much
death.
are we rating the lightning death?
Actual probable death of like, oh, he just, he got old and eventually passed on. Like 0 out of 10. Like that is just, I don't care.
Bad.
Whatever. But lightning bolt death, 10 out of 10. Top 10 deaths we've had.
Good stuff.
So I will go for a 9 because it might not be true.
Okay. I'm sticking with an 8 because of no poetic justice. Trevor, what are you going for?
I'm gonna go with 9 because I think there is poetic justice in the
Okay, fair.
getting smote by the gods option.
Okay. I'll respect that. So that gives us an 8.7 out of 10 for final moments. Next category is battle hardness, which is how good was he at war and conquest and fighting, which he has a good record, I'd say. Manages to retake Egypt, and that's pretty nice and clean. He doesn't really get involved in the wars in Greece, which is, it's all right. Not much glory going there, but it works out. And then the Eastern Satraps revolt, he manages to slowly beat it back and send them off and defeat them. So though the empire is generally a bit more fragmentary, I'd say that's a net positive overall. I'm 6 or 7. Let me go for I'll go for 6 because there's no new things being taken. But yeah, that's my call. How about you?
In this version, he really doesn't do much. I mean, there's a lot of wars, but he fights in the one battle in Egypt.
Yeah, personally, he doesn't actually seem to do much.
I'm
He
feeling
doesn't
like
go
a
down
4.
in history as
Okay,
as
4.
a renowned general or a good strategist.
Yeah, no, especially.
It goes fine. He doesn't get involved in many,
Yeah.
problematic conflicts. I think I will agree with Trevor. I think a 4 seems adequate.
Very nice. So overall, doing some fancy math, we get a 9.3 out of 20 for battle hardness. So slightly below an average. That's cool.
Yeah,
Next
that's
category.
This is just very funny to me because every other version of the hypothetical has him marching all over the country, reconquering everyone.
We chose the one lazy Cyrus that just stays home, and it'll be cool.
We didn't listen. We are not to blame
Audience
here.
Yes. Defer blame.
This just means that you can get Trevor's whole script and then find what could have happened. You can just have fun on your own with your friends, just making new history.
I can
It's
have a
good.
whole
We didn't
multiverse.
spoil.
It's great.
We didn't spoil anything. It's great.
Nice. And the next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulation, which I think works out pretty well for him. He murders his brother to get the throne. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that works. Maybe it's more shock factor, but he definitely stabs Sparta in the back a little bit too later on.
That's true. I think that's worth something, definitely.
Also, extra points just because Parisatis is there. She
aura.
Yeah.
How many assassinations did I attribute to her in one paragraph? It was 3.
Yeah.
Quite a few. That's a good. I also
it might not have been
attorneys framed for the murder. That's strong. Good stuff.
We have to count that. Come on.
So
Cyrus the couch potato. Sorry, good comment.
Nice. So yeah, scheminess. It's not like a Darius the Great levels, but I think it's an honorable level of being dishonorable.
Yeah, I was good choice of words, Umberto.
It's the honest ones you have to watch out for.
Yeah. So let me see. I think like a 6, like just above average. I think that works. How about you? All.
I'm willing to
Yeah.
give. See, because I know what my other options were. I'm willing to give a 7 for successfully assassinating his brother.
That's fair.
Yeah. I was gonna say I would go high. I would go with the 7 as well.
Okay, very nice. So you're very matchy today, which gives us a 13 out of 20 for scheminess, which is pretty damn high. The next category is shock factor. How shocking was he in his conduct? Well, we said he betrays Sparta, so that's a thing. He marries the daughters of his brothers, all his nieces. So that's, not much by Achaemenid standards, but we can still feel icky about it. That's perfectly in charge.
All 3 though?
Yeah.
Why?
Dynastic reconciliation.
Yes. You don't want to have other people who have your blood. So there's that.
It still backfired for him anyway because he couldn't marry everybody who was related to Artaxerxes. The guy already had a lot of kids.
Yeah, that would have been a bit much. But So yeah, so he does all that and stabs Sparta in the back. So not terribly shocking, honestly. Like by ancient king standards, I expected worse. He does hand over a lot of people to Parasatis, which is he enables her, I suppose. But
yeah, but here's the thing.
Idolatry. That's a shock factor.
Yes, that one definitely should go to shock factor. That sets him apart from other Persian kings too.
Yes,
absolutely.
So
hey,
yeah,
we have a few points actually.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go for a 7 on shock factor. I think it's.
I was also thinking 7.
Yeah. Sariel, how about you?
I'll go for a 6 just to bring things down a little because he was shocking, but also like, come on.
Fair enough. So we've had
more.
Yeah. So that's a 13 out of 20 for shock factor. Next category is Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire overall? I think it's, fair. Definitely better than his brother.
I mean, we picked the version where he is pretty good. Like,
yeah, it's like,
fair enough. Honestly, no,
it's not new magic golden age Darius the Great, but it's everything is solid and working, and sure there's decay, but it's not terrible.
I'd give him like Artaxerxes the first tier, where you've got a pretty big rebellion in there, and you've got some trouble in the provinces that is more or less your dad's fault, but like you handle it, and the empire's still there when you're done, which is
I think it's like more a steady hand that just gets it going, and we keep there. So I think Aaron Shine a 5 works because it's like steady going, nothing too incredible either way. It's just safe,
solidly mid tier.
Yeah,
maybe a 6.
Ooh, okay.
For the assassination instead of the civil war, but like that was
for
plan A in the
first
place, so I don't know how much that gets to count.
Fair.
So then, I think 5.
Okay, 5 and Sariel.
No, I think 5 makes sense.
Yeah,
like you said, it's well, and like everything is kept more or less in the right. Nothing goes terribly wrong. Nothing is spectacularly incredible.
Yeah.
The mid 4. So.
Okay, so that is a 10 out of 20 for Aaron Shine. Then for Face of Faces, before the show, I tried to look up any portraits of Cyrus the Younger. Didn't find any. I don't know if Trevor, you had the chance.
Oh no. The gods really are against this.
Go.
Ooh,
no, that was probably just it struggling as I tried to share my screen.
Okay, fair.
So this is a coin from Ionia.
Okay.
Of some Persian in the late 5th century. So it's around the time that Cyrus was there. It's in the region where he was in charge and had to mint a ton of coinage to pay all of his mercenaries. So it could be him, but it's at least the best we've got. It could also be Tissaphernes for all we know.
Yeah, it looks old for a 22-year-old, but
right?
But is
Old
that just
for
because
Cyrus
that's
the
how
Younger.
we picture beards? It's a short beard for a Persian
guess.
king.
That's
yeah,
fair.
true. It is very short for a Persian king, but
and it's got flaws in the metal, but that's not necessarily intentional.
yeah, that could be. But yeah, I think it's an all right portrait. We're not sure if it's him. Like a 2. That's my face.
It is
of faces.
contemporary though, which I always give extra points to because it's good to find a portrait that was at the time.
I mean, realistically, we would have his tomb carving, and he would look like everybody else.
Everyone else,
Yes.
Yeah, basically. Hopefully, had it not as exposed as
Oh.
Darius II's, and it would look decent.
Let me see.
Just pick a random carving. That'll
No.
work.
I have a strong suspicion, personally, that we actually do know where Cyrus's tomb is, and it's in northern Iraq, near where his mother had some estates. It's not
okay.
officially identified, and I think you guys may have used it when you were talking about
The Cyaxares.
Cyaxares.
Yeah,
because
Cyaxares too.
a weirdo in the 1920s went around Iran labeling all of the Achaemenid tombs with major historical figures.
Yeah.
But
I see.
it's from the right time and in the right area where this could be Cyrus's tomb. That's
Okay.
nowhere near hard fact, but
I mean, I was gonna say he should have a tomb somewhere, right? Like he's still
you'd think Cambyses
a
would
member
too,
of the
but
royalty, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, I don't know. Based on this portrait, I'm going for. Well, based on this portrait and assuming he would have the same portrait that everyone else has, I'm going for a 3.
Yeah. Yeah, a 3 seems fine. Because it's
Here's-
cool that
Yeah.
there we go. It's cool that we get some kind of portrait, but also it's not reflective of what the person actually looked like. It's just figure of king. And I don't know.
yeah, this if this is his tomb, it at least gets some more contemporary clothing going than the normal tombs do, but that's just about it.
Yeah. Not ideal. So, what scores are you aiming for?
I would give a 3 for the coin,
Okay. And
just
Sariel?
because it's at least unique, even if it's not him.
Yeah, that works. It is varied, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I would go with a 3.
Okay, so that gives us a 1.5 out of 5 for Face of Faces. And as we mentioned before, we had a 6.2 for lengthiness, because that's 62 years of reign, which leads us to a grand total of 62.4 out of 100, which is a massive score. It is our second best Achaemenid after Darius the Great. And just after him, we have we just have Artaxerxes III with a 59. So, yes, Cyrus the Younger this version of Cyrus the Younger is doing a great job, at least at being juicy. Actual
God,
skills,
Yeah,
give or
he
take
got
it.
mediocre on all of the practical things, but he was
Yeah,
exciting.
mediocre on practical things, but if you're good at murder and subterfuge and you're a terrible person, then we like you. So go
Listen,
for it.
these scores are not for best king, best at the job, or not at all. We actually give points for shock factor. So outrageous things you did or scheminess, which is not always good strategy, but it can also be attempting to murder a bunch of people. So sometimes you have a really good king that gets really low scores because everything was fine. And everything was going well. So
So pretty good. But last question is, do we think that this version of Cyrus the Younger is a Shahanshah or rather just a Shahanah? I think I'd be going for Shahanshah. That would be my inclination.
I do like
I
him.
think
I
this
did
version
enjoy.
gets in there.
Yeah, I think it's, not the highest ever. I don't think he'd get to like the final, but I think he definitely deserves his spot in the Paradise Gardens.
There's an
Yeah, I
interesting
agree.
thing where I couldn't conceive of a version where he wasn't just like killed immediately, where his reign wasn't really interesting.
I mean, yeah. Also, it wouldn't be a great reign if it's just everything just sort of plods along, nothing special happens. The end.
And
On to the next
how would
thing.
that even work given like what we know was going on in other places
Yeah.
at the time? Like we know that the Scythians are invading regularly around then. We know that Greece is on the verge of war. We know that Egypt is seceding. Like there's so much going on that something kind of has to happen.
I think the only way he couldn't be a Shahanshah is if he were his brother and just failed miserably at everything that was going on and just had everything on fire constantly and was just barely dealing with it through people dying of natural causes and saving him. So, yeah.
As Hal put it in the chat, he did nothing dramatically.
That's true. Yes, pretty much.
Well, that kind of brings us to the end. If you have tickets for the after party Q&A, you can transition over to that now. It is already up and running, and you should see us there shortly. Umberto, you should have the
Yes, just saw it.
thing in your chat, and to everyone else, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for participating.
Yes, we hope you had a fun time.
We had lots
certainly
of
did.
fun. You will have access to this for the next 7 days. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye. Take care.
If you want more information about this podcast, you can go to historyofpersiapodcast.com. That's where you will find my bibliography, the Achaemenid family tree, and plenty of other things, including the support page, to financially support this project. There are all sorts of ways to do that, but most importantly, there's patreon.com/historyofpersia. You can sign up for a monthly subscription ranging from $1 to $20, and access to things like ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and discounted merchandise. Even if you don't want to subscribe, you can also visit the show's store, either through historyofpersiapodcast.com or historyofpersia.launchcart.com. You can also support this show for free by leaving a rating or review on your podcast app of choice. I always love to see your feedback, but even better than that, tell your friends to listen to the History of Persia. Share it on social media at History of Persia Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, and just History of Persia on Twitter, and everything else that's trying to be Twitter. Thank you all so much for listening to The History of Persia.
Gamarjoba. My name is Roberto, and I would like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to check out my podcast, The History of Sakartvelo, Georgia. In all likelihood, I would venture to guess that you found us because you were searching for either podcasts, YouTube videos, blogs about the history of Georgia, or you're hearing this on another podcast, like this one. I'm both sorry and happy to report that this beautiful and fascinating country is, to my great surprise, criminally underrated in the history world. As of now, this is the only podcast I am aware of dedicated to the full history of a nation and a people that have served as the battleground for empires all throughout European and Asian history. But the land of the Kartveli is so much more than that. The birthplace of wine, the second Christian kingdom, the land of fantastic food, nearly superhuman dancers and musicians, and perhaps, most importantly, a people that have preserved their culture, pride, and independence after centuries of one conquest after another. Empires rise and fall, but Sakartvelo always seems to survive in the end. So, let us celebrate this beautiful land by coming with me on this journey from prehistory to the present day, right here at the History of Sakartvelo, Georgia. You can find us on Twitter at history_Georgia. Sakartvelo is spelled Sakartvelo. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.